Why settle for emulations when you can have the real thing?
Hi, it's Von Herzog. I'd like to welcome you back to the Social Club, my analog digital hybrid studio. Today, I want to talk to you about how I built my own SSL hybrid console here in my studio. If you've ever worked on a large format SSL console, you know how truly special they are and how they can impart an extra dimension to the music and just give it what you can't quite find in the box.
Consistent feedback from the world's best producers has proven that analog summing still brings a record together in a special way that no emulation plugin can match. Sigma and SSL's no-compromise approach to designing audio circuits delivers summing with an extended low-end frequency response, wide stereo imaging, clarity, depth, and detail. When it comes to sonic tone and character, many top engineers will say that a significant part of their sound is the magic that happens when you drive the analog channels and mix bus of a console a little too hard. That delicate, cohesive distortion only a pushed analog mix bus brings to their mixes. Our experiments have found this to be exactly the case with Sigma. It is at its best when pushed to that sweet spot, to the point where it yields that extra sonic dimension which has always been part of the legendary SSL sound.
Now, before we go too far, I am not trying to say you can't get a good mix in the box. I get good mixes in the box. I've heard plenty of good mixes and masters in the box. They exist. But for my workflow, for the way I want to do things, this is why I decided to set things up this way. I want the convenience of digital with the sound quality of analog. One of the things I've always tried to do is make the most efficient steps possible when I have the opportunity to upgrade. For instance, if I only have $1,000 to upgrade my studio at that point, I'm not saying what's my favorite piece of gear I want for $1,000. I look at it and I go, how can I best improve my studio with this $1,000? How I choose to do that, how I go about doing that can be very different. And I can go in a bunch of different directions, and it might not always be the sexiest choice. Sometimes you have to buy sound treatment. Sometimes you have to buy a metering plugin. It's not always the bright lights and knobs to turn. Not always, but sometimes. And so let me walk you through how I built my very own SSL hybrid console in my studio. Let's go. And this is your friendly reminder, I'm giving these speakers away. Inclined Fidelity VC7S studio monitors or bookshelf speakers, your choice, use them however you like. This pair is going to a winner on August 1st. So make sure you sign up by watching my audio files versus Studio Engineer's video. Like, comment, subscribe on that video, and you're entered for a free chance to win these. August 1st, giving them away. Make sure you get it. Some of you may be asking me, Von, why would I ever want to build a hybrid console? Can't I just do everything in the box with plugins? Sure, you can. I could too. Why do I choose to do it this way? I have found that analog tends to get me to my target quicker and easier. Does that mean it's better? It works better for me. That doesn't mean that it's better for everyone, and I'm not saying that. But if you're truly interested in leveraging the addition of analog to your digital setup to get that extra 10 to 20% of dimension and that finished, polished sound of a finished record, how do I get that? I have everything set up right, to the point that I don't even have to adjust the gain levels on the Sigma buses because everything's dialed in. It's gain staged and dialed into where it needs to be. So as I push the music out of the DAW, how hard I hit the Sigma, everything's preset for the proper gain stages, for the compressors on the A bus and the B bus, and folding the B bus back into the A bus. It's beautiful. I don't use a limiter. I use the Convert 80 Plus instead of a limiter. I'm not the only one that does this. There's plenty of us that do it, but it gives me an advantage that I really like. I love the sound of the converter. I like the Hammond transformers that are built into the converter that I can leverage if I want. I like the emphasis knob. And most importantly, I love the clip guard. That's why I don't need the limiter.
A lot of high-level mastering engineers don't use limiters. Instead, They crush the hell out of the input stage of their mastering converter. And they use that as a limiter instead of the limiter. It's a different sound. It's more natural if your converter can do it. The Convert 80 Plus has been designed to do that. It can take a lot of heat.
You might have seen photos of me working on an SSL 9000J console. And that was me at Soundstage Studios in Nashville. Great studio. If you're in Nashville and you're looking for studio time, check out Soundstage. They're well worth the time and money. Great spot, fantastic equipment, beautiful room, great spread, well worth checking. But having worked on a real 9000 console, I know what it sounds like. I know how it should react and how it should respond. Behind me, I have 3 controllers, the UF1, the UC1, and the UF8. These controllers give me hands-on control over all my SSL plugins, actually any plugin using the 360 link, and my Sigma. I can control my Sigma directly from the faders on the UF8. That's priceless. SSL's patented MDAC technology is what takes that MIDI data and transforms it to analog, and that's what allows me to control the 16 stereo channels. So let me tell you about my interface and how the audio goes out, runs through the analog, and then comes back in to the DAW. Here's how I do it. First of all, I have an Antelope Orion 32 Plus. That gives me 32 analog channels that pairs perfectly to the SSL Sigma. I take the 32 outs from the Orion, plug them to the 32 inputs of the Sigma, and then I run those 32 outputs of the Sigma back to the 32 inputs of the Orion. So I can print all my stems in their mixed position when I'm done with a session, which is great because when I'm done with a song, I can hand off printed mixed stems to the artist, which they can use when they perform live if they need backing tracks. Once I have all 16 stereo channels routed into the Sigma from the Orion, then inside the Sigma, I have a whole plethora of controls. I can decide which channel is mono versus which is stereo. I can decide to send it to the A bus, the B bus, or both. Once I have my A bus and my B bus, I can decide whether I want to use the inserts on the A bus and the B bus. I can decide if I want to fold the B bus back into the A bus so that both buses are printing back into the converter. Ultimately, I'm just trying to get the best quality audio I can, and this is the best system I have found for the amount of money that I put out. So I've always tried to buy the right kinds of pieces of equipment to be able to slowly, over time, piece this system together. Now, this didn't happen overnight. I didn't just go out and spend a bunch of money and then end up with all these pieces of equipment at my house. I slowly built and acquired over time. When I first got into the analog summing game, I started with the SSL X-Desk, and that was great. I got an expander for it, so I had 32 channels that I was running of analog, but it was still a fully analog mixer, meaning I had no DAW control over it. I had no recall ability on it. And honestly, you know, I set the levels on it and then I just decided how hard to push into it. So it was pretty much like more a gain staging decision than how should I adjust the faders. But I decided to sell the X-Desk and the expander and get a Sigma. Why would I choose a Sigma? Well, I don't have 250 grand for the Duality console. Hell, I don't even have the 100 grand for the AWS console. But this is the same exact mix bus that they use in the Duality and the AWS consoles.
Using MDAC technology unique to SSL, Sigma takes the super analog mix bus from SSL's Duality and AWS consoles and delivers it in a 2U rack design, offering stunning true analog performance within your computer-based studio.
So I'm getting the same mix engine that's in their $250,000 mixing board. Their flagship model, I have the same mixing engine here in my rack.
Sigma takes analog summing to a whole new level. It has 16 channels which can be either mono or stereo, giving you up to 32 inputs to the mix buses. The levels of the analog channels can be controlled in real time using a hardware control surface and also by using volume automation written inside your DAW. Now anyone who can drive a DAW can mix on an SSL.
And so how do I choose to send my channels to the different buses? Well, The way I personally like to use it, instead of breaking the song out into different sections and affecting them differently, I send everything to the A bus and everything to the B bus. And I use that type of parallel compression to dial in the final sound of the record. Here's how I do it. Everything goes to the B bus and gets hit by the warm VCA bus compressor. It's just like the SSL bus compressor. I like it. I don't like the transformers on it. I never engage them. It imparts some really weird high frequency stuff that I do not like. And so I never use the transformers on the warm. But it is a good sounding compressor otherwise, and that's what I use on my B bus. On the A bus, I have the Chameleon Labs 7721 VCA comp. I originally had their first model of this. The 7721 is a big upgrade. It's a big upgrade. Their own hand-wound transformers that they created. I had some issues with the VU meter on it, but aside from that, this unit sounds amazing. Really great unit. And I'm only ever really using 50% of it because I keep that wet-dry knob at high noon because I want to let some of that dry signal bleed in. You know, the individual channels are already compressed and limited a bit inside the DAW. So by the time they're getting there, you don't have to keep smashing them. And recently I've gone to a outboard vocal chain where I'm using a Lintec EQ and a Lin 76 compressor. And I decide based on the song if I want to put the Lintec compressor before or after the compressor. I can do that in my patch bay and it makes life easier. But I'm processing the main dry vocals through that. And once everything is fully summed and beautiful sounding out of the Sigma, I then take those A-bus outputs and I put them directly into the Dangerous Convert 80 Plus. And that is the final analog master print. I do something a little different. I don't mix and master as separate stages. I know a lot of people do, and it's something that I did for the first 15 years of my career. However, with enough time and practice, do you hear that part? It takes practice. You can learn how to mix and master at the same time. I've just gotten to the point where I know how I want that end record to sound, and I can't take a mix halfway there. You know what I mean? I can't take a mix and only get halfway to the end of how I know it's going to sound in the end. I want to push it all the way so I know that the final analog sound that I'm hearing that's being printed back in is final. There's no one else that's going to be affecting it or adjusting it or messing with it. It's the final print that the artist can send off to the distributor and that it goes into all the different streaming networks. ClipGuard makes that a very easy process for me. It lets me know that I can trust that when I make that analog print, I know it's not going to be clipping in the box and that that file is good to go. Some other time I can go into the individual pieces in gear and tell you all of the amazing bits about each piece of gear. But for now, I just want to give you what my system is using and why it sounds as good as it does when I'm done. And if you want to know what your music would sound like running through all of this beautiful analog gear, hit me up. Check out my website, thesocialclub.studio. Check out the testimonials, check out some of the music I've mixed and mastered, and contact me. Let me know how I can help you get your music sounding better than it's ever sounded before. So hit me up, Von Herzog at The Social Club. I'm right here. I'm mixing in analog and digital. I'm using my hybrid approach, and I'm getting better sound results than I've ever gotten before. Don't be late to the party. Come join The Social Club. If you're an artist who is working on an album, I know how expensive it can be when your music's finally finished at the end, right? You finally worked on this album, you have 10 songs, 12 songs, but now you have to pay to get them all mixed and mastered because you're not an engineer, you're a musician. Well, hit me up. And if you'd like to kind of squirrel some money away for that album so you're not doing a giant bill at the end, join my Patreon. Every dollar you spend on Patreon gets kicked back to you for services here. So it only makes sense. It's worth doing. So check it out. So now that I've talked about the analog gear, let's talk about the digital side. Let's go to the controllers and how they let me really affect the Sigma and really finish and mix and master a record live. Let's dig in and let me show you how I can actually control the hardware with these controllers. I want to show you now how I integrate my digital controllers to control the analog. I have the solid state logic UF8, the UC1, the UF1. Then I have an iPad that I'm using to control Cubase functions. Bunch of shortcuts. I can see my session overview, has a transport. It's pretty helpful. But honestly, these three controllers are what does the majority of the work when I'm working on a session. I pulled up the session from my mix template video. Files are available there in case you want to follow along. But what I'm going to do with it now is I'm going to show you how I'd mix it down in analog as opposed to just doing everything inside the box. The first thing I'm doing is I'm sending everything out to these 16 stereo outs. As you can see, they're all here and they're all linked. But channel 16 has a bit more gain coming out of it. Why? Channel 16 is my analog vocal chain. So I have that hitting a little bit harder because that's going directly into the Lintec EQ, which goes into the Lin 76, which then hits the Sigma. I'm choosing to drive that channel harder because I'm driving it into a specific piece of analog gear. The rest are all hitting the Sigma. But what the UF8 lets me do that I love is it lets me control any channel in the session here, right? As you can see, I can cycle through any channel I want, but it also gives me the ability to swap to the master faders. So if I'm all the way over here at the end of my session, right? I can switch to the master fader, and now look, I can pull all of these up and down in unison, which is great. It allows me to adjust the song as a whole without adjusting the individual mix levels. Now it is adjusting how hard I'm hitting the Sigma and the Lintec, but you need to get that gain staging right. There's no shortcut. I'm going to hit play on the session just so you can kind of hear where everything is. I have things kind of rough mixed already using the SSL Sigma. As I mentioned before, I keep my A and B bus at the same point. 3 dB on both of them is how hard I'm choosing to hit the converter. Now that crushes the converter pretty hard if I hit the gain staging right at everything before it. So once it gets to those +3 on both, boom, hitting the converter for the perfect mastering level for the specific song. And how hard I decide to drive that is how many luffs we end up with in the end. I am one who always says, master to the music, not to a metric. You don't want to master to a standard like, oh, Spotify says -14 luffs, everything's that. If your music is going to sound weak and anemic at -14, you're not doing yourself a service by trying to hit that marker. Get your music to sound the way it should sound. Let the other Spotify and streaming services worry about turning it down, because you also have the option in those streaming services to turn off loudness normalization. And if you do that, then you get what the actual file would sound like at its normal volume. So you can end up playing louder through them if you choose to. I don't recommend it. Master to the music. Then you're in good shape. Now I'm going to pull up the faders for the 16 channels inside the Sigma. So here you can see they're easily laid out, 1 through 16. Nothing hard to understand. Channel 1 is mono because it's my kick. Channel 8 is mono because it's my bass. And channel 16 is mono because it's my vocals, and they're going into mono analog processors. I keep my vocals dry on fader 16, and I keep the effects for the vocals, the sends, on channel 14. That allows me to dial in a bit more of like a wet dry feel so I can get them exactly how I like them for the song. But I'm going to show you a trick in a little bit to do with automation that really helps bring your song to life. This is the SSL UF8. It's 8 fader control unit. It allows me to cycle through the channels of my session. As you can see, they're banking across here. It does a lot for me, but what this really lets me do is it gives me real SSL faders to control the faders inside the Sigma. So as I push these faders, once I set it up to control the Sigma, it moves the faders inside there and drives the analog gear harder, which gives me that harmonic saturation that's, synonymous with SSL. I saw a video where Chris Lord-Alge was talking about how he gets his SSL desk to like bend. He goes, I don't know how else to explain it. It bends when you hit it a certain way. And it's true. There's this beautiful creamy saturation that you can get out of it when you drive it hard. But we're going to get to that. This also gives me full control over all my channels in the DAW, which is great. As you can see, I can select over here, wherever I'm going. The UC1 gets even more granular with the controls. This lets me control one channel at a time, which is shown here in the window, and I can cycle through and pick. And automatically, as I cycle through here, it changes the EQ to match whichever channel I'm on. So when I get to channel 16 or 15 or 14, I can see which EQ is being applied to each of those channels. And then I have the UF1. This is a single fader unit with a transport and a jog wheel, but what I really love about it is this screen up here I use with the metering plugin, the SSL metering plugin. Let me show you the SSL 360 software. The SSL 360 software is an overlay that gives me control over every track that I have an SSL plugin inserted on. Also allows me to use the center section of the UC1, which controls the bus compressor, and I can have up to 8 bus compressors. I'm only using one in this session, and I'm using it on the drum bus. But what I was saying about the metering is up here, it allows me to cycle between a 31 band EQ, a loudness meter, and a phase graph, and SSL VU meters. Now you can calibrate these to however you want. My VU meters look like they're peaking because they are. I'm crushing the converter. That's part of what I'm doing. So when you see it play, my VU meters are crying uncle, but thanks to clip guard and these beautiful converters that can take a lot of heat, you're not hearing it. It's beautiful soft clipping. And so that's a quick overlay I can bring up anytime I want. I just press a button on the controller and it pops up right in front of me. I like using the 31 band EQ as my main meter screen. And I use the clarity meter for my loudness metering. So let me show you how the session is set up, and we'll get into how I'm controlling the hardware. I have my stems here, all routing to their appropriate 16 groups. So group 1 for the kick, 2 for the snare, 3 for the hi-hats, and so on down the line, all the way down. Now, if I pull up the SSL hardware here, you can see we're not using channel 7 and 15. Everything else is in there. Channel 1 is the kick, channel 8 is the bass, channel 16 is the vocals, all mono, because like I said, going to mono buses. How can I use this to control that? That's a cool little trick here. Check this out. I can come over here to the UFA and I press Master Insert. And that is going to show me Master FX1 is the Delta Control 16. I page over and here's all the volume controls on these knobs up here. But you don't want to twist knobs for an SSL. You want to push faders, right? Exactly. So hit the flip button. Bong! Look at that. Flip them back. So when it's in this mode, it is still controlling the tracks inside the DAW. When I switch to this mode, the faders are now controlling these faders right here, 1 through 8. And I can show you that by pulling this down, and look how it goes down on the screen. I can do multiple faders all at once if I want, and they all work. That's really driving the SSL. That's some amazing stuff there, guys. I'm gonna reset it back just so the levels go back to where I had them. Oh, that's only 8 faders. There's 16 in there. What do? I page over one more time. Now I have the last 8. So boom, boom, first 8, second 8. It's all here. I can control it all right here. And then this gives me a digital channel strip, which means everything recalls instantly. And I can see how it all looks here. Now, if you notice, these tracks look silver, my groups, and then the individual tracks look darker. Why is that? I'm using 2 different plugins here. I like to use the 9000 on the groups. The 9000 has bigger EQ curves, much broader. And by the time it gets to the group, I'm not looking to make those little fine tuning kind of things. I'm looking for broader strokes. If I want to adjust those things very fine tune, I go over to this type of EQ, which has a much sharper Q and a tighter bell. I still use shells on the top and bottom, no matter which I'm using, but those 2 bell curves in the middle matter a lot for what the shape is. And even when you take the Q as wide as you can get it on the 9000, it's very wide. And when you make it as narrow as you can get it, it's still really wide. The most narrow on the 9000 is still wider than the wide on the 4000B. Different strokes for different folks, different flavors. I like having the more finite control on the individual tracks and the broader control on the groups. It's just how I like it. And this gives me the digital recall for the individual tracks. So I'm not sitting here resetting manual EQ for every track in the session. This EQ is really good. It's really close to how the SSL EQs sound in the hardware. And it's close enough for me that, look, to me, the analog advantage comes in when you're joining it all together. It comes in that summing process where you're joining all the parts and having them exist in that three-dimensional space. I find that when I mix in the box, it sounds very two-dimensional. It might sound well mixed, but it's very flat and in front of me. And when I mix in analog, I get that front to back dimension. It's not just left to right, it's front to back. And it gives you space and clarity and separation between the different items. It doesn't sound like it's all playing from one wall. It sounds like the musicians are placed in different places on a stage, like they would be in real life. And that's what we're going for. And that's why I mix in analog, because it helps me get to that place so much quicker. And this gives me all the control over everything I need in the session to get it done quickly and accurately. And if I need to write automation for it, I write automation for it. But now let me show you how I also use this to write automation for the vocal sends, and how that really brings a song to life, and how it livens up the vocal and helps give you some more of that dimension. So it doesn't sound like you just slapped a couple of inserts onto the vocal, like it's some delay and reverb over the vocals, and you're good to go. Don't be lazy. It might be a little bit more work to set up your sends, but honestly, if you set it up in a template, they're there ready for you every time you start a session, like I did, and my mix template's free to download. So if you don't want to do all that legwork, go grab the template, use it for yourself, and then your sends are there for you when you're ready. Now, let me show you how I automate them. All right, I'm going to go to group 16, and I'm going to show you that right now, the automation for the sends, for the vocals, are all at a flat, static place, which means they're going to sound that way. So I'm going to show you how I liven them up by using the UF8. I'm going to switch to FX send mode, and then I'm going to again flip it so I can play it on the faders instead of playing it with the knobs up here. Let me jump to the vocals.
Knocking at your door, I know you're alone.
All right, they're the vocals, right? So if I change the effects sends, what is that going to do? Let's find out. I'm going to push different ones and you'll see how. This is HD cart. This is Valhalla Shimmer, plate, hall, 16th delay, 8th delay, quarter delay. You ready? All right. I'm going to hit play and I'm going to start moving these, and you should be able to hear what it's doing. I'm going to write the automation so that it follows what I do, and we can go back and adjust it if we have to after the fact. But kind of playing it while it's live and getting that live feel is really the best way to go about making a record. Look, back in the day, before automation could be written to a DAW, the engineers in the studio would play the mixing board. They'd have to memorize the song and know when to raise this one and when to lower this one. And it was almost like a musician playing an instrument, a very technical one. This is the same type of thing. I'm trying to get that expressive feel out of playing the sends. And then, thanks to the wonders of the digital world, I can go back in and tighten up that automation and make it exactly what we want. But let me just show you quickly here what I'm talking about. So I'm going to hit play, and then I'm going to start moving these faders, and you should hear the vocal effects change a little bit.
Knocking at your door, I know you're alone. This trap that I fall for, so close to the bone. My ear to the wall now. What do I hear? I just know somehow you're suddenly near. Dream, it's all a dream. It's just a lie.
See what I'm saying? Just a little messing around, playing it quick. Now let's go see what that looks like. Oh, here we go. I'm going to turn the write off so that we're just reading the automation now, so we're not going to overwrite what we did. But I'm going to show you how I can kind of get in here now and dial this stuff up a little nicer. Look.
knocking at your door. I know you're alone. This trap that I fall for, so close to the ball. My ear to the wall now. Why? I just know somehow you suddenly need. My ear to the wall now. Why? I just know somehow.
See what I'm saying? I'm not going to sit here and do all the tedious work of going through this. I just want to show you the concept, and I hope you get that now. Automating your sends, giving them some life, breathing some life into the song. Maybe you don't like what I did here, and you don't have to. But my point is, I'm just trying to get the concept across. With time, I go back in, I dial all these things in, and I get it sounding perfect to where the vocals have that energy and that depth and that polish that you hear on the songs on the radio. That's one of the reasons I love this thing, you know? So let's go back to regular routing, flip it back. There we go. Now we're back to where we're comfortable. Like I said, I can come over here and I can affect the faders inside the SSL live. And I can write that automation if I want. You know what I'm saying? Like when I'm done writing that, I can save that into a session. This little 2-rack unit box is the heart of my studio. It's what pulls everything together in the analog world. And it's honestly the most efficient piece of gear I think I've purchased. It does a lot of things and it does them really, really well. I think they've discontinued it. It doesn't appear to be for sale new anymore. To me, that's a crime. I believe that these things should be all over the place just based off of like the capability of what they can do. But the good news is it's still supported from a software sense, and the chances are it probably will be in the future because, again, it's using the same MDAC software that the AWS and Duality consoles use, and they're not going to stop updating those. But that also means that you can pick up one of these Sigmas cheap, like $2,500, $3,500. When they came out, they were $5,500 new, I think. I think I paid $4,500 on sale. I do have to commend Antelope for how nice the Orion pairs directly with it. Antelope does a really good job too with this Orion internal patch bay. So this is all the different connections inside the Orion 32. And I can drag and drop to put things in different rows. So it's magnificent. It lets me do a lot. And it also, this is how I end up monitoring directly from this. I'm monitoring the SPDIF signal coming out of the Convert 80 Plus. So the Convert 80 Plus is capturing the analog live. It's printing it to a SPDIF signal, which then I'm monitoring back directly from the Orion. And being able to monitor the sound directly as it's coming in means you're hearing everything as the analog is being converted to digital. You're hearing how it's making that conversion. And you have a lot of control over how you dial that in. Convert 80 Plus has Hammond transformers that I can choose to engage or disengage. It also has an emphasis knob, but the emphasis knob only works if the transformers are engaged. I keep them engaged all the time. I keep the emphasis knob at high noon. And that's just the sound of my console. That's what I mix into. So I know as things are coming through the SSL, going up into the dangerous, that I'm hearing as clearly as possible what the analog gear is playing and that it's being captured faithfully by the digital gear. But I will tell you, this makes my life so much more efficient because I open up a session and everything recalls. The Sigma itself resets back to all its previous settings from the previous DAW session, and it just makes life easy. They've even improved it with these plugins. When it first started, these plugins weren't available. When I first got the Sigma, these didn't exist. You'd have to set up 16 MIDI tracks and you'd write the MIDI data for the automation for the faders. Obviously, this is a much better solution, and having the control over here makes it even better. This is the heart of my studio. This is all the gear. This is how it works together. And this is how I'm able to put out such high quality material from the Social Club. There's no shortcut to quality. You have to invest in the gear. I've spent 25 years slowly trading up and investing in gear to get myself to a system that I am happy with, and I am proud to put mixes and masters out into the world from this gear. I know what I'm capable of with it. Maybe it's just my DIY spirit. I built my own speakers, I built my own console. You know, I'm one of those people, like, if I don't see exactly what I want, I go out and try and do it myself. And this is an example of that. And I hope you understand how all of this stuff can tie together to make a full hybrid studio where you don't have to pay the overhead for all of that gear, that 4,000 console. So by going in a hybrid route and keeping my gear to only the bare minimums of what I need to get the advantages, I think I've come up with a system that benefits me. And it benefits my clients because they don't have to go out to a giant studio and pay an insane fee to try and get their music finished. They can send it to me. I can do it here with all this gear in my studio. And it just saves everyone time and effort. A lot of the legwork is done for me by already having all this gear connected. I don't need an assistant. You know, I have enough templates, everything's set up. I can open a session and bang through it pretty quick. There's no shortcut to actually using your ears and listening. I can't trust the gear all the time. I still have to listen and make sure that what I'm hearing is accurate. But when you get gear of this quality, it just shines, you notice. And I hope that helped paint a picture for how I do all of this, how I set up all my gear, and how Solid State Logic has built gear that all ties together nicely if you know what you're doing. And hopefully after watching this video, you know what you're doing. If you can find a Sigma cheap out there, pick it up. Software is still available. It's fantastic. Works on Apple Silicon. Go for it. Also, I want to thank Annie for lending her vocals to the session. I want to remind you to check out CZARINA. And please go check out my website, thesocialclub.studio. Thesocialclub.studio. That's my website. Go check it out. Easy to find, easy to get to. Learn some stuff. Make sure you enter for your free chance to win Incline Fidelity VC7S speakers, hand-built by me here at the Social Club. August 1st, we're giving them away. Don't miss that. Watch the video, Audiophiles versus Studio Engineers. Also, shout out to CZARINA. I'm wearing my CZARINA shirt today. CZARINA, amazing Gothic synth artist from Spain. Go check her out. She has amazing music. CZARINA just put out a new video for Ghost Machine, her new single, which is amazing. You have to go see it. It's hard to do it justice in words. You really have to see it. But that song was co-produced, mixed, and mastered by yours truly right here at the Social Club. So go give it a listen. Listen to CZARINA. Check out her amazing music and her bonkers special effects. Her and her husband are in a special effects team who do fantastic work. So check out her video. Link below. If you want to check out some of my own music that I've worked on here at the Social Club, check out my group VHXRR with vocalist Rob Rowe. We have a trilogy of EPs that's out. We have a couple new singles off our new EP that's coming out. Give it a look, vhxrr.com. And I hope to see you back for my next video. So until next time, this has been Von Herzog from the Social Club.